today.
Sorry, Cynthia.
Oh, that's fine. Glad that you could join us today. And we have got one of the most exciting webinars ever for you today because it's all about HR systems and how they can help us if we know how to use them. And we've got two of the top people in the world to tell you how to use these systems. So let me introduce them in just a minute, but I want to do a little housekeeping first. But the webinar was approved for one SHRM PDC and one HRCI business credit. So we will get those credits out to you probably by Monday, maybe before, but I'm going to go ahead and say Monday. If you don't receive it, it might be because you weren't on the entire 60 minutes. You must stay on the entire 60 minutes, and that's not my rule. That is SHRM and HRCI both require that. Also, you will receive a quick little survey following the presentation, which SHRM and HRCI also require. And if you will, just take a few minutes. There's just maybe 3 or 5 questions on there, and help us out by completing that webinar. Now, I want to let you know a little bit about our speakers, but our learning objectives, that's very important as well. You will get a recording of today's webinar, and the webinar, the handouts, PowerPoint will actually be on YouTube. So once it's out there, you can also access it there. So the learning objectives for today, you're going to learn how to explain HR systems and how they influence decision-making, risks, and outcomes. You're going to be able to identify key decision points within our HR processes and apply a structured approach to evaluating your HR system's effectiveness. Now, one thing, in case you don't know anything about our speakers, I will tell you a little bit about them, and then you'll understand the next part of this. John Thalheimer is an award-winning consultant. Raise your hand, John. There he is. Yeah. He is a leadership facilitator and co-host of the HR Stories podcast. He works with organizations across industries to design systems that support better decision-making, stronger leadership, and consistent performance. John specializes in helping organizations move beyond reactive HR practices towards intentional system design that balances compliance, culture, and business outcomes. Love it. Now, Chuck, and of course, both these guys are certified. Chuck is a seasoned HR executive and co-host of the HR Stories podcast with extensive experience serving as an HR director and advisor to organizations of all sizes. Chuck brings a practical, real-world perspective to HR systems, compliance, and leadership decision-making, drawing on the decades of experience navigating complex employee and organizational challenges. So now that you know these guys, I want you to know that they wrote this wonderful book. Can you see it, guys? This is a book of checklists, and it is the Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Editions. This is my copy that they gave me, and I can tell you, I have been through this book, and I would have given anything, guys, if I had this when I was practicing HR. So this is a must-have, and I believe it is on Amazon. Is that correct? So I want you to take a good look here at the book so that you will remember it when you see it again, and be sure and get your copy. No more Googling everything. We're going to AI. This book will be at your fingertips, and it has everything you want to know about HR in it. So I'm going to turn it over to the guys now, and thank you for being here today, and we're very excited to have you.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. Hey, Cynthia, did we tell you that that book sold out at the annual SHRM conference?
I am not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were very
wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been selling out at the SHRM conferences. So later in, folks, we'll tell you how to get it. We have a website. You can go on Amazon.com, and if you get it, it's also good for 3. It's approved for 3 SHRM recertification credits. But we'll talk about all that later. We've got some exciting stuff to talk about today.
Okay,
All
I'll
right.
be back the last 10 minutes. So if you guys have any questions, be sure and type them in the chat box or comments. We welcome your comments. And
Yeah.
then we'll discuss them at the end. And so I will be back then.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I guess I should say I'm trying to figure out where we are. Chuck and I are both excited that we're here. As Cynthia said, we do host the HR Stories podcast. If you haven't listened in, please give it a listen. What we do is we really look at situations ripped from the new headlines and go, what did that company do? And then what should we do? What's the better way to handle it from an HR perspective, from a leadership perspective, so we can do that? And really, this webinar builds on the same idea, right? It's stepping back from the urgency of the day-to-day. We know all of you are here, so we do appreciate you being here, and how HR systems actually shape decisions and improve in imperfect conditions.
Yeah. So most of the time, these conversations start after something breaks, right? Oh, something broke, or maybe even almost breaks. And someone says, why does HR kind of always feel like this? Like we're just rushing around and we just can't get engaged. So before we go any further, it's probably helpful, though, to say this out loud. Today is going to feel a little more like one of our podcasts rather than a traditional webinar, one of our HR Stories podcasts. We're going to go back and forth. We're going to challenge each other. We will maybe riff on a few things. We'll explore different perspectives, because that's how these ideas actually get clearer, shall we say.
Yeah, that's great, Chuck. Yeah. And today's not about asking HR to try harder. We know you're already trying harder. It's about looking at the system HR works within and how can those systems influence decisions, risk, and outcomes. And I wanted to start with something which may seem really odd at the beginning, but I wanted to start with recipes, right? And so I am fascinated by recipes in general and how they work to help us make decisions. And I think what's really interesting about those decisions, recipes, is that it gives us a place to go back to, right? When we're cooking a meal, it gives us a place to go back to, a place to look at. And so they really help us simplify our ingredient list, our resources, all of those things that we need to do that.
Yeah, and when you first brought this up, I was like, okay, you had to give me that kind of construct, but once you did and broke that ice, I'm like, yeah, like recipes. You might have one recipe for the main dish, another one for a side dish, something going in the oven, something on the stove, and you're adjusting as you go for maybe a big family meal.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? And so when you think about preparing a meal, you have all these different recipes, and so they start at different times. There's different constraints, there's different concerns. Sometimes the oven's running hot, sometimes someone's running late, and so we're trying to build that. So meal prep isn't about blindly following a step. It's about coordinating multiple recipes while responding to the real conditions in the moment.
Yeah, and it's funny. My mother, my grandmother, my mother especially, cooking a lot of Armenian dishes that she knew off the back of her hand. Yet she was still every time, and I still have these cards to this day, little note cards, right, with stains on them from the butter and the milk and the cinnamon and the
Right.
the yogurt, right, the yogurt. So, anyways, it's the important thing is here. Those recipes will do the thinking before things get stressful. So that was kind of like her security blanket, right? She knew these recipes, but with all the stress of cooking these Armenian dishes, they gave her a baseline so she did not have to invent things on the fly. And let me tell you, she's cooking, the kids were little, we're running in and out. Can we go here? Can we go there? Storm doors slamming. There's all this chaos going on. She had those recipes right there, could always go back to them.
right, and know where she is and kind of go through that. When am I getting that invite for dinner? I'm not. I don't think I've seen that in my mail, Chuck. Maybe it missed. Maybe it didn't get in there. But I think it's really what's fascinating about recipes is they start with an intent, right? What are we optimizing for? Is it speed, cost, experience? That intent shapes the systems before we even start cooking, right? And shape those recipes.
Yeah, and when you skip that step, let's say, the meal still gets made, but it can be stressful. And what we're trying to do is remove that stress. And that's what we see in HR all the time. And one of the things, John, I just want to let the listeners know is that I'm living it every day. So I know Cynthia said, you and I, we've got some consultant background and such, and you've got some general work experience, and I got work experience. I'm living it every day. I'm sitting back in the chair as an HR director, coming to you from my actual office here at work. So
Yeah.
I know exactly where we're going today.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I mean, again, right? I think it's about that reality in there, right? And so HR is work is complex, it's
It is.
emotional, it's regulated, it's interrupted, it has high stakes. You're dealing with people a lot of times on their worst days, leaders under pressure, and decisions that have real legal and human consequences. And so there's all of these decisions that we're making, and that's really part of that reality.
Yeah. So HR is complex, and I want to take this one again because it comes directly from my time as an HR director, both in the past and currently. So that it's complex. It can be emotional. HR is not just the transactional relationship, it's emotional. People, a lot of times we go out, we recruit, we hire, and that applicant, to get them from applicant to starting, it's not just all transactional, it's an emotional it's an emotional connection that they also has to have. So HR is complex. Again, it's emotional. It's regulated. We know that. It gets interrupted. There are high stakes. You're dealing with people on their worst days, and leaders are under pressure. Decisions that can have real legal and human consequences. Yet so many HR systems are designed as if you'll have all the time in the world. You'll have plenty of time. You'll have perfect information and obviously a clear head.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the slide, right, and thinking about the recipe, right, going back to that concept of preparing a meal and doing that, um, these are all the side dishes, right? We have the main dish, compliance with employment law, that kind of runs through everything that we do, but we have recruiting and selecting, we have onboarding, we have performance management, learning and development, benefits. All of those things we need to do and we need to have a place. And if we just go ad hoc at them, or we don't have tools and we don't have the processes and systems lined up, that's when we fail. That's when we make the mistakes. It's not that we don't have the knowledge and the smarts. It's we just don't have the capacity sometimes to do all of these things really well. And so I wanted to jump in, Chuck, and if you could help me here, talk. I kind of want to go over some of the learning objectives. I don't want to go through the slide in detail, but which ones, like, I know as we prepared this, which ones stood out to you on that?
Yeah. So to me, it's I love spotting when those HR systems are vulnerable. Where your organization is running on memory and maybe just heroics or just workarounds. There are so many times, and I'm living here in the beautiful Florida Keys. I get up, a beautiful sunset. I drive to work on US. Everything's wonderful. I come into work, and you think everything's going to be perfect. The systems are working. Our processes are working. My team is in place. And there's just there could be one small tiny kink in the system, and boom, it can have cascading effects. So when I think about HR systems being vulnerable, it's important to spot where they're vulnerable so you have those redundancies and abilities to recover as quickly as possible.
Yeah, and I want the listeners, I'll call you all listeners. I want you all to think about, and what I really want to do in this webinar is have you challenge you to kind of see HR differently. Because typically when we see issues, right, when we come in and we audit an HR department, it's typically not an effort problem, right? People are putting in the effort, they're doing the work. It's
Mm-hmm.
not a capability problem. They know how to do it. It's typically that the systems and the decision support issues are the ones that are failing us, right? Those are the ones that we're failing. Those are the ones that we're falling into. And so we want to kind of go there instead of going to, oh, that person's not putting in enough effort or that person doesn't have the knowledge, which again, right, in some cases could be reality, but we want you to start looking at it from a systematic point of view in there.
Yeah. So HR, we've established, is complex. Systems matter. We created a book on systems and checklists because checklists matter. Not once again, not because we're not capable, not because we're not smart, but because complexity can overwhelm even the best people. And there's one of my favorite stories. I tell it in some of my in some of my speaking engagements. We talk about it on our podcast quite a bit, but it captures perfectly what happens when complexity outpaces memory. So very briefly, we're going to go back into the 1930s, and Boeing introduced something called the B-17 bomber. And compared to anything else flying at the time, it was a massive leap. There were more controls, more power, more responsibility, and there was a big test flight scheduled. They brought in all the generals and all the big wigs, and they sat down, and this B-17 takes off during this final test flight. Boeing's going to show the big brass what we can do. And the military leadership's watching. The plane starts to take off. It climbs briefly, and then it basically rolls over and it crashes. People died, careers were ended, and Boeing nearly lost the contract for the B-17, and everyone assumed the same thing. This plane is too complex to fly. Now, if you recognize the B-17, you're like, I've heard of the B-17. So it died. It failed. No, because here's the deal. Here's what happened. There's a big investigation, and they found out the aircraft worked exactly as designed. So the failure wasn't a lack of skill. It wasn't a lack of training or even of the actual design. But one small critical step was missed under pressure. It was there was something that had to be released with the wing flaps or something, and because there were so many things to remember, the pilot forgot to release that. And so what changed? Everything. And it wasn't better pilots. It was recognizing that memory alone couldn't carry that level of complexity. So checklists, the people investigated it said, you know what? Let's create a checklist for the airplane. And the long story short, in the end, the B-17 is the plane that helped the United States win World War II. This is history. This is a fact. And to this day, checklists are used by pilots. You've probably seen it even in the movies. Doctors, everyone. Yes, pilots, these pilots are flying 20, 30, 40 years. They still use checklists. Don't believe me? I've talked to American airline pilots that I'm friends with. They said, oh yeah, we use checklists every day.
And you think about that, right, Chuck? You think about being on this B-17 bomber and you're flying it for the brass, you're flying it for all these people, and you're under all of this pressure, and the
Yeah,
conditions are always changing. And so,
always.
right? And so having that checklist to come back to and look at and have can be really important on there. And I wanted to go back and think about how do we create those predictable outcomes? Because that's what we were looking for, right? We're looking for predictable outcomes and making those things happen. And so this story that Chuck tells really changed my way of thinking about systems as a whole. And it really starts with how do we consistently make the right behavioral decision? Or more importantly for us in HR, how do we create the conditions that allow individuals to consistently make employees to consistently make the right behavior choice in the moment, right? And at first it seems so simple. Oh, I just need to make the right behavior choices. What we know is behavior choices are what leads to our outcomes, right? Those are what leads to our outcome. And so it's about the decisions, and we have to make sure that we're designing our workplace so the good decisions, the decisions that we want, are easy, and the decisions we don't want are hard to kind of get in there and kind of look at those things. So we're not going to teach a model today. We're not going to dive into that, but we're going to look at how do we come across and how do we make this happen. And so for me, it's about clarity, right? Clarity matters, resource matters, energy levels matter, collaboration matters, and systems matter because they shape all the things that show up, especially at critical decision points, right? Looking at those decision points in there.
Yeah, and it may sound real complex, folks, but as you just stay with us for a little bit, because you're going to see us break this down into very a simple model of sorts that you're going to be like, aha, I can do this. And so what John was talking about there, that's why HR at times ends up feeling reactive when decisions are being made late in the day, under stress, and with incomplete information. HR is expected to get it right every time.
Yeah, and that's what happens, right? Systems are designed, they're either going to support those moments or they're going to have lead people exposed. That's the difference between predictable outcomes and recurring risk in there. And I wanted to share a story that's actually in the front of the book. And so it's in the front of the book, and it says, and it talks about the termination levels. And so what happened was I had a friend who was director of HR for a small business. I think I had like 250 employees, right? So pretty small, relatively small business. And she calls me up and she goes, "You won't believe what happened today." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. What happened today? What happened?" She goes, "Well, this morning, I come in and the CEO is upset, really upset." And I'm like, "Well, what happened?" She goes, "Well, the night before, one of her HR managers had terminated one of her employees. But in the conversation and all that kind of stuff went on, everything seemed to be going fine. But the HR manager ran out the door without letting IT know, right?" And we all know, like, what? No, how can that happen? It happened. Well, the individual, the employee, figures this out somehow and sends this scathing email to everyone in the organization about how terrible the organization is, how terrible the CEO is, and how the organization is going to fail, and blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, the CEO's like coming in, wants heads to roll, wants all of these things to happen. And what we realized in our conversation is they did not have a termination checklist. They did not have a termination checklist, and they had nothing to follow. And so, yeah, it's easy to blame the HR manager, but if we think about the conditions that were making her decision in that moment, right? End of the day, tired, exhausted, emotionally charged termination, right? Never a fun time. You're going to forget, right? You just want to get home. You have to deal with your family, right? All these things going on. Of course, they're going to make that decision. And then what happens is, right? So then what happens is we blame the person and we don't go back and look at the system.
Yeah.
Right? So one of the things, Chuck, is I'm going to get out of this slide presentation.
Okay.
And I'm going to share with everyone the book.
Yeah. John, as you're looking at, that story scared me to this day, that I do try and remember right away when someone terminates, because here's the deal. Those of us that use ADP, right? ADP, auto pay, right? Oh my gosh, we terminated a salary employee, or we forgot to terminate them and forgot to turn off auto pay. And, next thing you know, the system's just paying. I remember I went into one company as an HR consultant in an audit, and I found out they had terminated a director of housekeeping several weeks earlier, and they were still paying the person.
Whoops.
Yeah, so
And
that's
those are the things. And I think, I mean, again, right, it's easy to blame the person and go, well, you're not doing your work and you're not getting it right and you're not having it. But it becomes an issue. And I think that's where they're. All right, Chuck, do you want to kind of talk about the book and then I'll get us to the page that we need to go? I want to show them the termination checklist, but I'll scroll through if you just want to talk, give a kind of brief overview of the book. And
Oh, sure. Sure. So yeah, a brief overview of the book. So our this book here, so John and I would teach classes, we teach HR classes for HR folks, and we would talk about having a checklist for this, checklist for that. So all of a sudden we started thinking as we're co-teaching classes and individually, wait a second, I would then create checklists, and I had checklists even as early on in my career. I said, why don't we just put these things together? And so we came up with 80 checklists, and it's over here on my screen, so that's why I'm looking over here. And we thought, okay, what is everything we could do in HR? What is everything we can do in HR, but boil it down to a checklist? And that's basically what we did. Then we put it in different categories, and what you see here is there. If you go to hrchecklists.com, you can even see it. You can download a sample copy. So there's a lot out there. But John's going to show you a couple of these checklists and how we use them. And we're going to talk about how you can develop your own checklists also.
yeah, and so here's the termination checklist, right? So the one that I was talking about. So with that director of HR, my question was in the middle of our conversations, do you have a termination checklist? And she's like, no, we don't. We keep saying we need one, not doing it. So we actually sat down and had that conversation with her going, hey, so what are the things we need to do and what do we need to be paying attention to? And so Chuck and I had already started, because this was before the book, had already started putting together our ideas. And so we used her learnings and lessons and we kind of put that in there. And so you can see this book checklist. And so one thing is you can get this book from Amazon. It's a printed book. It's what Cynthia showed you at the beginning there. You can also go, if you go to the team at HR Stories, you can also get the digital download, which the cool thing about the digital download, and maybe not that important, but you can actually click on the little things. You can use it as an actual checklist. And so some people find that better. A lot of our readers are like, I want the hard copy. I want that, right? And so we ended up doing that as well. And so what we did is we started with a voluntary termination. What do we need to do, right? What are those things we need to do in there? And then we talked about involuntary termination. So of course we're going to hold the termination meeting. And so you got to prepare, review, reason for consistency, all those things. And it may seem, well, yeah, that's logical. And of course it's logical on a beautiful sunny day. But when it's storming out and all this pressure's on you, it's nice having a place to go to be like, all right, how do you do that? How do we make that happen? Provide employee with a termination letter, provide employee with severance agreement if laid off, review WARN or OPA if applicable, right? So the WARN laws, preparing for termination, review policies for consistency. One of the things we're always teaching in our classes is consistency. So if you're firing Julie for this reason, you better have fired Joel for that same reason, right? There needs to be that consistency across your board. Review employee files, alert security, alert IT, right? There it is. Alert payroll, as Chuck said, making sure that we do that. And then there's the termination, the actual termination meeting, right? What we're going to do. And then after termination, what you need to do. And so it's all in there to kind of help you kind of get through that process and see that. And I think it's a great tool to kind of use and kind of go through there. Now, one of the things that we kind of were really strong about in our conversations when we were building the book, we wanted to make sure that everyone that opened the book could use it right away. And so we put in legal concerns. Here's the things you need to be thinking about, right? So we need to be thinking about the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the ADA, the age discrimination laws. We need to make sure that we're doing those in a manner that there. And we also threw employment at will in this one checklist as well. Chuck, anything else you want to say about this
Yeah.
particular checklist?
Yeah, no, not so much that, but there are once again, you're not just cooking one thing. A lot of times in HR, you're coordinating timing, temperature, people, priorities. Checklist isn't the meal, it's one recipe. And so when we wrote this book, we didn't do it because HR doesn't know HR. I wrote it because we keep seeing, and I keep seeing, good people get burned when systems relied on memory instead of design. And we're not going to show it here. One of my favorite checklists that I use even now, because I do employee investigations. Well, when I say all the time, every month or so, you're doing an investigation. Yet you're just thinking, oh my gosh, okay, what do I do? Here comes the complaint, here comes whatever. And so for me to have that checklist ready to go on employee investigations, it takes that stress off. Let me refresh my memory. Let me go forward. So I do want to go back to the story we had just told. And, in that moment of the termination story John told, HR was juggling multiple recipes at once: legal risk, human impact, leadership pressure, end of day exhaustion. And if this checklist had been built and put into that termination process, the IT handoff would not have been an optional thing. It would have been remembered. It would have been automatic. But before we go any further with any of these tools, I want to talk about HR Systems Health Check and kind of do a little overview. It's kind of zoom out for just a bit. And an HR Systems Health Check, okay, is how we kind of step back and look at that whole meal, not just the recipe. So we're we're talking about, meals, right? And a gigantic meal. And we're not just talking about individual pieces. We're not talking about individual recipes. We're stepping back. And I want you to think of this as now we're going to look at the whole meal. We're going to do this HR Systems Health Check. Most organizations already have policies. They have forms. We have good people, right? What they don't always have is a clear picture of how all these pieces interact under real conditions. And my HR peeps out there know that the real conditions, they change on a moment's notice. So a health check is structured in a way to see how strategy, systems, decision points, and tools actually work together in practice, not how they're supposed to work on paper. So this isn't a compliance audit. So what we're talking about here, and this is going to be part of the free tool that everyone on the webinar here today is going to receive. So I'm not talking about a compliance audit. That's another one of my favorite checklists, by the way, but it's about catching, and it's not really about catching mistakes or even assigning blame. It's about visibility. So once you can see the system clearly, better decisions and better outcomes can become much easier. John, I don't know if I explained that as correctly.
No, I think you did. The one thing that I was thinking of as you were talking about that is that a lot of times we're like, well, we don't have systems, John. We just do the work. We just do all these tasks in there. But think about this. We have a hiring system. We have a performance management system. We have a rewards and recognition system. We have a resource management system. We may not call it that, right? We may be calling it our annual reviews. We don't think of it as a system, but it really is a system and has many moving parts. And if those parts are not aligned with the organizational strategy, this is where conflict arises, right? This is where problems come up. These are where these things come in. And so it always starts with strategy, right? We need to think about what is the strategy for the organization? What is the strategy for my HR team, right? What's that overlapping strategy? What are we trying to do this year? And so maybe it's reduce turnover. Maybe it's to increase our talent pool, right? Whatever it is, decrease the amount of money we're spending on benefits, whatever that is. You need to understand that, because then you're going to put systems in place that are going to have that, right? Strategy answers a simple but critical question for everyone making decisions, and it's what matters most right now. And in HR, this often gets fuzzy, right? And a lot of times when we're talking to HR directors, HR managers, they're not sure, right? They're not sure because they haven't gotten clarity from the operations team, the executive team. And so, is it about risk reduction? Is it about speed, consistency, the employee experience, engagement, supporting managers? When strategy isn't explicit, systems drift, right? There's that word again, Chuck, drift, your favorite word. Different leaders make different assumptions, and HR ends up filling in the gaps, often without having the authority, alignment, or air cover. A system health check surfaces through assumptions so that the organization can align with what is actually optimizing it for.
Yeah. So let's talk about the system design. And, how does the work really flow? Not how it's described in a process. So the system design, we ask very practical questions. And I'm right now, as I'm speaking, I'm already thinking about an example of, how do we get someone from applicant to day one, right? There's there's the interviews, who's doing the interviews, who's sending the offer letters, who's taking care of the new hire paperwork. And those of you that are using ADP and Recruiting Manager, it's not an intuitive system. So we have to kind of get involved and make sure, is my coordinator doing this? Is my generalist doing this? Once we get them, how are we scheduling them for orientation? Who is reminding them? Who's involved in each step? Where do those handoffs occur to get them to orientation, to get them into the department and in the department training and orientation, and get their uniforms and their outfits? What steps are assumed instead of defined? So a lot of those breakdowns aren't mistakes, are failures of effort, because we're all trying. Everyone here is really, really trying to do the best thing. But the breakdowns are a lot of times the predictable results of unclear or even an overly complex design. And when systems rely on memory, maybe just heroics,
Right.
or someone usually handles that, that's when risk quietly builds for things to break down.
Yeah, and I think, kind of, you said it there, that heroic part is really fascinating to me, because I remember when I was working in corporate America, things would come up and people would just take it onto themselves. Like, we need to get this done. It's really important. And so a small team would work overnight, get it done, and it would be presented, or the product would be done or fixed or whatever needed to be done. And to me, and so these people were rewarded for that, but it was a system failure that led to those heroics. And if we don't take the time going, why did that happen? Why did they have to do it? Right? That's great that they didn't. We appreciate it, but why did they have to do it? What's going on behind that? And typically that is in those decision moments, right? Those decision points. And so the decision points are this, right? Strategy is intent. This is what we intend to do, but decision points are those actionable behaviors that people take in the moment. And I was working on this morning. I was looking at how environmental conditions, or just the conditions of the workplace or the conditions of the person, is different at every levels of your organization, right? And so the way I look at this is that my executive team has different conditions, different things that are influencing their decisions than the frontline employees. HR has different conditions than those two. And if we don't see that and don't recognize that, this is where things are going to go wrong, because we should be building conditions that make the decision easier. The decision we want to make it easier, and the decision we don't want, we might make it there, right? So these are the moments where someone has to choose under pressure. Maybe it's late in the day. Maybe it's with incomplete information. Maybe it's heightened emotion. Maybe it's competing priorities. So terminations, investigation, all of those are in there. And so we have to think about how do we support at those moments? How do we support those individuals? When risk is high, how do we do it? A health check identifies these points so they can be intentionally supported rather than, well, we're surviving in there. And if you don't mind, Chuck, I was listening to NPR this morning, and our local station had done it must be like a 4-hour program on the terrible accident that happened outside the Reagan Airport where the helicopter and the plane crashed. And they were talking about all of the conditions that led to that accident. And the whatever the air thing is, the national air thing said, look, this was 100% preventable. And again, it's because people had different conditions on their decisions that led to lack of oversight, led to poor decisions in that moment. And so we need to be really careful about building a system that helps and supports our employees to make those decisions.
Yeah. So folks, I know it's starting to sound a little more complex. This is part of the tool, the free handout, you're going to get at the end. But once we understand strategy, system design, and decision points, we look at the tools. We look at a tool. And tools are like checklists, templates, guides, and scripts, but they're not going to fix the broken systems. However, when they're aligned to work with real workflows, they can be incredibly powerful. They can reduce that cognitive load. You know what I mean by cognitive load? Like, oh my gosh, I got a million things on my mind. They will help create consistency. Tools will help create consistency, and they can help people perform well even when conditions are not ideal. So tools are going to work best when they support the system instead of trying to compensate for it.
Yeah, and again, I think that's so important. And that cognitive load, it's funny, those words don't make it like they don't really sum it up, right? And I think about, and Chuck and you and I have had this conversation where it's just the day, right? It's just the day, and you're juggling. You have terminations coming up. You have new people coming in to be hired. There's a benefit question, and you're dealing with all of these tasks that you have to do that have an emotional risk component to it, which causes you to want to get it right. You want to make sure we do that. And so one of the things we've done, we've worked in so many different organizations, nonprofits, growing business, complex, highly regulated environments. And we said, you know what? How can we do this better? How can we do this better? And what happens is organizations don't need more policies, unless we have enough policies, or more effort. They need clarity. They need to be clear. And what systems are, when systems are aligned, we know HR stops feeling reactive, right? We're like, oh, we're not coming into that day going, all right, what are we dealing with today? Leaders start gaining confidence in HR, which gets us that seat at the table. And issues that used to repeat start to quiet down, and relief comes from clarity, right? Getting that clarity, doing that on there becomes really important on there.
Yeah, that is the goal, to have a seat at the table. I heard her saying one time, it said, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. You're being eaten alive. So you definitely want to be at the table. So we can talk about tools in the right context now. So I want to slow down a bit, because this is where people may misunderstand what checklists are actually for. When we say checklist, a lot of folks picture something very rigid, something very basic, and it can be, okay? It can be. But it's not meant for people who don't know what they're doing. And that hasn't been my experience at all. So there are two types of checklists, as if we have to boil things down to. The first one is what we call the do confirm model. And that's going to be for experienced professionals. In other words, I kind of know what to do, okay, but I'm using the checklist to just confirm, okay, what I did, just to make sure. It's the do it and then confirm. And the second type of checklist is the read do checklist. So the read do checklist is it's like the recipe, John, for a lot of people maybe, or whatever. I'm going to read it and I'm going to do it. I'm going to read it. I'm going to do it. I was just talking to my folks the other day because we are running into some errors in the hiring process, and I said, okay, we need and I didn't say it this way, but a do, and they're on this seminar, by the way, they're on the webinar. Hello, Yenny and Lourdes, and so they are the do confirm. So I said we need to have just a very simple checklist that we put into each employee's file that said, okay, if someone's worker class is full-time, did we make their benefits eligibility full-time? There's little things in that ADP system, and it's mainly because we have a system that is not as intuitive. So we have to create a way to kind of back that up. And so let's just make sure and confirm we're doing all the correct things. Everything's lined up. So John, I know, it's really not, is it about replacing expertise?
No, I mean, again, right. And I think when we look at why checklists work, right? Why do they work, and why do we talk about them so much? There's 5 really basic reasons that we look at, right? And so, one, there's a standardization of process. What I love about checklists is that I can create one and I can hand it off to a manager and go, follow this. Here it is. Here's what I want you to do. Every single time this comes up, here's what you need to do. They have a reference now. It's standardized. It's like giving somebody a recipe. Here, make the donuts. Here's how you do it. It also improves our compliance, right? It gets us in compliance, gets us doing those things. It enhances efficiency, right? So one of the things, and this goes back, okay, so Chuck, I'm going to go back a little bit, but my first career, I should say, was in theatrical and television production. And we would have, during a live show, we would have certain things that had to be done at certain times. And so we would have to create the list so they could do those at the exactly right time and create that efficiency there so they knew exactly when that was going on. Without that, they would have been like, well, I think this is coming up and I think this is next, right? And so it takes that cognitive load to try to keep those memories in there. It increases accountability, and then it kind of has that cognitive load on there as well. And so kind of being aware of that makes sense. The last thing we looked at, Chuck, was outcomes and patterns. How do they work? And kind of look at it. And one of the things that I think is really important for us is that when we look at results, right? Results are actually feedback. It's telling us what we did really well and maybe what we didn't do really well. And so I'm always doing with teams, I'm always doing after action reports where I'm thinking about, all right, we just had this incident and what did we do right? And what did we do wrong, right? And so I'm not gonna call myself out, but I had a situation yesterday that I missed an obligation that I needed to do. I got an email back today and the person was so kind and said to me, look, we just have to learn from this, right? We have to take this thing and learn and see what we can do better. Not John, you, but us as the whole organization. What can we do better? And I thought, I mean, again, right, it made me feel a little relieved. I felt terrible that I missed an obligation. But again, looking at that, and so again, why are these things keep repeating? Why do we keep having these same issues? And then looking at that really helps us kind of get in there and kind of help kind of guide that out. So I wanted to, sorry, go ahead, Chuck.
No, I was going to say, I see it every day. So, my team does not mess up because they don't care. We mess up. Sometimes there's just so much going on. And the funny thing is, as we sit here, I can hear 10 people coming into the HR lobby right now since we started this. And it's just that kind of craziness that we're talking about. And it may not be a checklist you have to come up with, but some system design to kind of relieve you from having to remember everything.
Yeah, and I wanted to come back to recipes because what I want you to all walk away with is HR isn't hard because you're bad at it. It's hard because you're managing too many recipes at once and constantly changing environment, right? And so all these things are going on and changing and going kind of in there as well.
Yeah, and like I said, when something goes wrong, it's not because we didn't care or didn't want or didn't know what to do. It's because the system to remember things was not set up, and just, critical step was missed at exactly the wrong moment.
Yeah, and so everything we talked about today, strategic alignment, system design, decision points, tools and patterns, all of those are asking this one single question: is the system doing enough of thinking before the pressure hits, right? And so this is where that strategy comes out.
Yeah. And look, and everyone loves to blame HR, right? They do. They love to blame HR. And HR folks, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm going to give you a phrase, and you may or may not have heard this before, but credibility is currency. Credibility is your currency as an HR professional. And so when things are not lined up, HR ends up absorbing that risk. And so you need to do whatever you can to maintain that credibility, and systems in place will help you with that.
You know what I'm hearing right now, Chuck? I'm hearing everyone on the webinar going, but we don't have time. We don't have time. We don't
Oh,
have
sure,
time.
exactly. Who has time to do all this stuff?
Yeah, and so here's the thing, and this is what I tell my clients that I do executive coaching with, is what I want you to do. Let's see, it's what, the next week, put 1 hour on your calendar for this type of system thinking, this strategic thinking, because when you do that, you start getting ahead of the problem instead of dealing with it in the moment, right? So get in there. And so then I want you to do is add 5 hours, right? Add another hour and add another. So you get about 5 to 7 hours of strategic time. That's your time to think about what's not going well and what you can do about it. How can you reduce that? It's system thinking that's going to really get there as well. Chuck, do you want to say something about the book? We have to get into Q&A here, but I just wanted to,
No, I think we've set it up. You can go to ultimateguidetohr.com. You can read through a lot of it. You can there's a way where you can download a sample. But I want to talk a little bit about the handout that we're going to give. It is a call to action. It's a simple way for you to explore an HR systems health check. And if you want to help, if you want help seeing these things more clearly in your organization.
Yeah. And again, right. And we'll send that, everyone that's here, we'll send that to you. Probably what we're going to do is going to wait till we get the recording up on YouTube. So it'll probably maybe Monday, as Cynthia said. We'll get it out to you with the recording, and then you also get the handout as well. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. I think the email is at email@team@hrstories.com. I'm looking to Chuck to confirm he's my email guy.
Yep.
But if you have any questions, go ahead, Cynthia. Let's see if there's any questions out there.
Okay, well, my chat box will not allow me to see anyone, so I cannot see who has questions. So maybe you guys.
Yeah, I can't see it either. John, can you see any questions or any chats?
I don't see any. Let me close it out and let's pop it open again.
I don't have access to the chat box, but I believe people can turn on their audio and ask questions, correct?
Yeah. I think so. Let me see. I don't know.
I would have loved to have had this book, as I've mentioned that so many times, but it really is the HR Bible. I don't think there's anything that you haven't covered that was left out of this book. So, really, we used to call our attorney for everything.
Oh, yeah. God, that's expensive.
And if I had had this, I would have made my CEO so impressed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found the question answered, and there are no questions. So.
Wow, we did a good job then.
You really did.
Folks, if you get a chance, listen to the HR Stories podcast, hrstoriespodcast.com. imperfect.com. We actually are on YouTube. You can watch John and I and our antics. We have fun. I tell people we love HR, so you don't have to. That's what I tell my operational folks. But if you love HR, you may love our podcast. Sometimes we'll just do Q&A. Sometimes we'll just do HR in the news. But sometimes we'll take a story and we'll break it down. It's not sometimes as intriguing as a true crime podcast, but we try and make it fun and intriguing like that. We give a lot of details that you don't normally will see in the news, and there's always a lesson in every story.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, I don't know why, I don't know if the Q&A is not working or the chat's not working, but I do think that the other thing that we do in the podcast is we're trying always to communicate the changes that are going on in employment law, best practices. As we all know, right now, there's a lot of changes going on, a lot of ways things are being interpreted. And so just paying attention to that. And so come check us out, the HR Stories podcast.
I think that's so cool. I wish I had had you when I was practicing. Awesome. But the book just tells it all. So it's the best reference book in HR, really, that you guys will ever have. Now, are you going to be, do you have employment law issues or just basics? Because that's constantly changing too. That's one of the things that.
Yeah, so in the book, we tried to be, not have it have to change every year, right? So we were trying to be kind of pull back on that.
More basic stuff, yeah.
But on the HR Stories podcast, we're always talking about the fact this year, in the beginning of the year, we did two parts. We did the part like, where are we in the employment law area right now? And then the second part was, what do we project or see happening as 2026 goes on? So we did both of those podcasts.
Yeah.
Well, in general, every time we get a new administration, we have to start all over.
Yes.
So it's really head scratching sometimes because we've always done it this way. Oh, but now we have a new president from the other side, so they don't want to do it that way. Immigration, to me, is the top issue now. The I-9s and the student visas, and so many larger companies have a lot of students in there now from other countries. So it's really uncertain times, speaking of what to do in specific situations. So sometimes we just have to call our attorney.
Yeah, and I mean, that's and we did an episode around ICE and what to do and how to handle that. And it was really popular for a while because it was a hot topic.
Yeah. If ICE comes on your property, what do you do? How do you handle it?
Right.
You know, I mean, there are specific things you can do that within your legal right. I mean, if we call it a treat ICE like a vampire, and that's not to be a political thing. It's basically meant to be a vampire thing. If you invite the vampire in, they will come in and they will have access to your house. You know, invite the spirit in, but if you don't, you don't. So,
Well, main thing, let's be sure we all do an I-9 checklist in our own departments and that we are prepared if we have a visit from ICE.
Somebody said if people have questions, type it in the Q&A. Chat is not working. So.
Oh, and there's one. Yeah, I did see a Q&A right now pop up. Oh, that's what you just read.
Right. So if you do have any questions, throw in the Q&A. You can find the Q&A on your board. But we got about 2 minutes left. So if you do have it, drop it in there quickly. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to either Chuck or I at the email at team@hrstories.com. We will be reaching out to all of you with those, the recording and the handout as well.
Well, thank you all so much. I can't think of a better presentation than we've had today, and especially the reference to the book. Once again, you can get it on Amazon.
Yep.
And I'll show the picture again.
And Cynthia, we do appreciate you, and we appreciate HR Professionals Magazine. Wonderful publication, and just great stuff. And you're always a great supporter. And folks, if you're going to an HR conference, you got to try and find Cynthia. Get a good look at her because she's there. Okay,
she's there. She's always talking to people. She's always connected.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
We like to do interviews on the spot because if you're not able to attend, it makes you feel a little more like you're there.
Yeah,
there you go.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right,
you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Cynthia.
We'll see you again soon.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.